So welcome everybody to our webinar on judging the USAWE Masters Dressage Freestyle. I'm Polly Limond, and today we're going to dive into what separates a good performance from a truly masterful one. First from the point of view of the judges, and then from the point of view of Collier, who is our freestyle creator, and she's been doing this for quite a while. So our goal is to understand how to balance the technical must-haves with the artistic wow factor that defines this top tier division of working equitation. So what freestyle is designed to show is the partnership between horse and rider. So unlike the standard tests, this is where we look for creative choreography and a seamless fusion between the movements and the music. As judges, we are looking first and foremost for the technical mastery, but it must also be delivered with harmony, fluency, and a sense of effortless difficulty. And the music has a tendency to enhance that. So let's go to the next slide here. First of all, from the USAWE rulebook, the sequence of the exercises obviously cannot be changed. So this is how it differs from the regular dressage, USDF dressage freestyles. So the sequence is defined by the protocol with no changes in the order of the movements. And the maximum time allowed for performing this trial is 8 minutes. The trial time begins from the salute of the rider to the president of the jury at C, and it ends with the final salute of the rider. So that 8 minutes doesn't include your entry before your halt and your salute. All exercises that are performed after that 8-minute cutoff will be scored with a score of 0. There are no coefficients in the master's test, and riders using a helmet will salute with a nod of the head and a sweep of the arm. And the male riders, if they're not using a helmet, will doff their cap with the right hand. So what happens if the music fails? So first of all, you stop, the rider will stop and exit with permission of the president of the jury. You want to reinsert that rider somewhere in a scheduled break or at the end of the competition so that they can get their music worked out without interrupting the other competitors' times. And when you reschedule the test, the competitor returns, well, like I said, either during the scheduled break or at the end of the competition. The judge at C determines the exact return time after conferring with the rider. So during the restart, the competitor chooses to either restart from the beginning or from the part where the music failed. However, any marks that you've already awarded before the failure will not be changed. So they can continue to ride that first part over again just so they can get the music correct and get the flow, but you will not change any of those scores. It is the rider's responsibility to perform that sound check as listed in the program. So technical scoring. When we look at technical execution, we are evaluating the correctness of the movement and the quality of the gaits. Is there clarity? Is there balance? Is there self-carriage? Even in a freestyle, the training scale, of course, is our absolute foundation. A beautiful piece of music or creative line cannot compensate for poor basics or a lack of rider effectiveness. Precision is absolutely the key here. And if you look at the collective marks here from the USAWE test, first of all, you have the paces, obviously must be correct, freedom and regularity. You have impulsion, obviously, submission, just like every other test, the rider score, and then, of course, the artistic mark, the music and the sequence of the elements and how they flow together. So don't forget that the artistic elements do not compensate for poor technical execution and basics. So musical interpretation. Music should not be just background noise, okay? It should be an extension of the horse's gaits. We want to see the tempo and the rhythm of the music matching the horse perfectly. Not just the tempo, but also the style of the music should match the style of the horse. So we want to listen for how the music supports transitions and highlights specific phrasing in the test. A successful interpretation enhances the performance rather than overpowering it. Judges will evaluate musical phrasing, transitions, harmony between the music and the movements, and then the overall presentation. The artistic and choreographic evaluation. So in this section, we ask ourselves, does the choreography highlight this specific horse's strengths? We evaluate the use of space, the flow of the sequence, and the level of risk that they take with their specific lines. We want to reward originality, choreography that pushes the boundaries of the arena as much as possible within the confines of the USAWE protocol. But it has to remain logical, it has to remain harmonious, it has to have flow. So the key question for judges, does the choreography highlight this horse's strengths? Some common judging mistakes in the freestyle. It's easy to get kind of swept away by a great soundtrack, but we must be careful not to let the music inflate technical scores for incorrect movements. Conversely, we don't want to penalize a rider just because their choreography might be a little unconventional. Now, again, with the freestyle in the USAWE test, we don't have a lot of leeway, of course, but there are ways to use the full arena, which we can go into later with Collier. But finally, you want to ensure that you're rewarding difficulty, because complex, high-risk lines of travel should be scored a little differently than a simple, safe one, as long as it's executed really well. So you want to notice, of course, that the music matches the gait rhythm, that the musical phrasing is aligned with the movements, and the harmony, of course, between the horse and the rider. And freestyle judging, it requires balancing two different perspectives. So rewarding correct training, of course, while also recognizing choreography and music that elevate the performance. So judges should consider harmony of the horse and rider, cohesion of the choreography, technical difficulty versus the quality, overall artistic impression, and your closing thought as you're finishing your final comments should be to reward technical excellence, harmony, and choreography, but the greatest masters freestyles are those where the music really fits the horse and the performance creates a lasting and emotional impression. And with that, I will send it to Collier.
Thanks, Polly. I think you've got one quick question in the chat for you. I don't know if you want to address that before I start.
Yeah, I was just getting ready to say. Leslie asked, what is meant by risk? Leslie, if you want to unmute and maybe clarify, that would help us a little. Oh. Unmute.
I'm trying.
Sorry.
Normally I can press my space bar and it unmutes, but it's not working today. So at any rate, you had a slide, Polly, that talked about risk, and you mentioned risk a couple of times in terms of lines and that sort of thing. What do you mean by that?
So using more difficult lines rather than simple lines, like we have a lot of people who use the diagonal lines, the short diagonal lines for their turns on the haunches, their pirouettes. And, you know, there's ways, we'll talk about that with Collier, but there's ways to highlight the horse's strengths when you can add in some more difficult lines. And that's what I mean by taking risk, is using the arena to the full extent to show your horse's quality. And in the leg yields and the half passes, making a steeper one, not a shallower one. There's ways to show and highlight the difficulty But again, you have to take risk, but you have to do it procedurally well, right? Technically well to get the good
Understood.
score.
That actually, those were good examples. Thank you.
Okay, and Collier, take it away.
Super. Thank you. Lovely to meet you all. Let me just share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see this. So thank you again for inviting me. My name is Collier Wimmer. I own and have owned Three Wishes Freestyles for the past 15 or so odd years. I've lost count at this point. One of the bigger freestyle houses designers in the US. I have the pleasure of working with everyone from all over the world in classical dressage, Western dressage, and I have done a couple of working equitation freestyles as well. So it's very lovely to connect with you guys here, and I'm looking forward to talking through how do we craft visual stories and talking more about the music selections and side of the freestyle component. So quickly, just a quick overview. We'll go through a quick background slide for me so y'all know that I know what I'm talking about. The connection between music and our brains. I think it's really interesting and important for riders to understand where that connection happens and how it happens. And so how do we affect that connection in a freestyle? How do we bring it into whatever we're creating, no matter what type of music we're using? We'll talk about the music selection, the freestyle creation process, and then we'll go into Q&A. I am happy to talk about certain aspects of choreography, but I will be completely honest, I have not done a lot of choreographies. I think I've done one or two for working equitation. So I think there's quite a big Venn diagram overlap between classical dressage and working equitation. But any specific choreography questions, I'm happy to group answer with Polly and Holly. So that's the rundown for the show for this evening. So let's get started. So quick background on me. My mom is the big dressage rider in our family. I grew up riding. I did IHSA, but my mom has always been the big equestrian in our family. She's got two mares. We're actually in Wellington, Florida right now. And she's training and I'm running around working with people on music. Outside of Wellington, we are in North Carolina, and I got started in freestyles years and years and years ago. I thought dressage was the most boring thing known to mankind, but the only interesting class were the musical freestyle ones. And so I'd go and watch as a little girl. And my mom's coach years ago said, "Hey, I've got this horse. I know that you are interested in music. Do you want to try to create something?" And at that point in time, we were starting to get our first digital editing software systems, like if anyone remembers Movie Maker on Windows. And so I was able to utilize those systems and start creating some digital freestyles. So really, Three Wishes is kind of like this mix of weird combinations of my life. So I have an education in music. I went through the Royal School of Music for choir. I was on the cusp of the technologically like inclined curve for all of our digital audio workstations and video and software program familiarity. And then I've grown up with a love of all types of music. I have everything on my Spotify playlist from Bollywood to K-pop to Mozart. It kind of depends on the day. Don't ever ride with me in a car. My shuffle is terrible. I've been a long time equestrian, and I think I've really worked with enough riders now to develop kind of an understanding of what each combination brings to the table and what can make them exclusive. So with that being said, I have done over 300 freestyles. I have several back-to-back finals champions at US finals. I've gone to Nations Cups, World Cup finals, Bulgarian games. I've had people ride in the Pan Ams. I see petties, working equitations, everything, except for the Olympics. So it's been really quite fun and a great journey. So as we go through, I am not actually pulling things out of nowhere. I have got a little bit of a background on this. So that all being said, let's dive into the science of music in our brains. So when you think about freestyles, right, we are essentially creating a story, a visual story that combines two of our inherent senses, visual and audio. And when it goes right, as Polly mentioned, we create something that has an emotional impact and an emotional outcome. There's psychological connections behind those reasons, and understanding that, as I mentioned earlier, will help us understand why freestyles impact us more than a regular test and why they stay with us. So when you're listening to music, it can result in absorption or an engagement, right? You kind of like zone into it or zone out. It's an intense focus on the music that can alter our emotions or ways of thinking. Um, and we really just feel super immersed, like when you're watching a really good movie and the Jaws theme comes on, right? Or when you're driving in the car and one of your favorite songs comes on, and 5 minutes later you don't know how you got to your destination, but suddenly you're there. So where does this absorption happen in the brain? So if you've experienced this, the sensation where you get chills up your spine or the hair stand up on the back of your arms, that is the distinct association with the limbic system, which is one of the oldest parts in our brain and where reactions occur subconsciously. Studies show that when the brain interprets certain aspects of music as a signal, we need to pay attention. So as I mentioned, the Jaws theme, the dana, 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 like you start to kind of get a little like, this feels not great. Or, the Lord of the Rings soundtrack is beautiful and, the hobbits are coming, right? Like there's certain things that and your body will react to. It's really interesting. This is one of the oldest systems of our brain. It has stayed with us since, we were way, way, way back living in caves. And we biophysically mimic what the music is doing. So when you're in a movie theater and you have the undercurrent of the music, your heart rate naturally starts to pick up. Vice versa, when you are going to bed at night and you want to play something calming and you have on beautiful classical piano music or soft nature sounds, your body's going to relax. And so finding that right selection of music to then sink into the audio representation of you and your horse is a vital ingredient to creating this freestyle story. It's kind of this interesting piece of the puzzle of, we have something that sounds great, and then now we have to match it with the audio, and then you create the floor plan along with that. Any questions on this section? Perfect. So, music is a small word that can encompass a lot. When we go through music selection processes with my clients, I have two keys that I want them to be aware of. Be more strategic than you think you need to be. If your goal is regionals or finals or worlds or whatever you want, and find music that you want to ride to 1,000 times over. You are going to need to know this music inside, outside, backwards, forwards, upside down, right side up. If you listen to it 5 times and you're sick of it, it is not your freestyle music. When we look at finding music that kind of fits within those 2 or 3 or those 2 keys, the big considerations, and again, these roll into the judging elements from the technical side. We want to have one theme. We want something that does link up audially with what you and your horse represent. If you have an 18-hand big black horse that's carrying down the center line, I really do not want to see circus music going with it. That is not going to happen. It's not going to fly. And this theme should flow throughout the freestyle. We should have a continuous story of music from start to finish. We should not be changing genres. Very rarely I will change artists, but I try to keep to one artist if possible. Some interesting options there would be like if you wanted to do a disco 70s themed freestyle, then I would say we could all have different artists in there, but the genre and the theme is that disco music. The music should also enhance the horse. If the horse needs a little bit of an audio push from behind, if it's a little bit of a slower mover, find something that kind of gives it a little bit of a push audially. If your horse has a really fast front leg, find something that visually slows him down a little bit. And what happens when you do this is you can kind of create a mirage that the judges are saying, oh, that's a very nice front leg. That is not a super fast front leg, because the music is helping to create this interpretation of the gait and the horse itself and the way that it's going. Also, the music should ideally inspire, right? We're telling a story. It should have a beginning, middle, and an end, and I'll get to that on the next slide. As Polly mentioned, we want to inspire and engage the audience and the judges. So, find something that not only you love, but you think is going to compete well and have a good impact with the audiences. In a way, when you are selecting music, you are a little bit like a movie composer or movie score composer, right? They have the film and they are creating themes and what we call leitmotifs, different areas to accompany the film and to really hit its high marks and its lulls. So I get a lot of questions. Oh, before I go on, any questions about that? Perfect. So I get a lot of questions about lyrics. And I generally think that lyrics are becoming more integrated within freestyles, but I would say I tend to keep them around 10% of the freestyle, unless it's a freestyle music selection that's in a different language. Interestingly enough, our brains interpret music in a different language that we don't understand as another musical instrument. So I don't know if anyone saw Delara and Catherine Dufour's Paris freestyle a couple years ago. It was all in French. I don't know French. I interpreted that as another beautiful language. It didn't detract from the freestyle. When you have English lyrics, what you don't want to do is have enough of those lyrics and that detract from the freestyle itself. And then you have the judges paying more attention to what the music is saying rather than the performance itself. So I generally tend to keep lyrics at 10%. So think of entrances, endings, lengthenings, turn on four haunches or pirouettes, things like that. Key elements and key places where we want them, and then let them float off and let the instrumentals come back in. Fun versus competitive. I run into this sometimes, and it really depends. If you want your freestyle to just be fun and you don't care what kind of music you have, great. If you want it to be competitive, look towards the left side of the slide and the 2 keys above, and think a little bit more strategically and work with your designer on, you know, your goals and where you want to go with the freestyle and how the designer can help you bring that to life. And then I get a lot of questions about this selection of music on the right. So Pirates of the Caribbean, How to Train Your Dragon, Future World Music, Greatest Showman, Piano Guys, 2 cellos, and I'll add in there Frozen. These have been done a lot. They are amazing musical selections. They have been done a lot. I always tell clients and riders, if you want something that's competitive, let's look at finding alternatives, because what we don't want is for your music to start and the judges go, oh, not another Greatest Showman freestyle. I heard 5 of them today. So think about finding things that are alternatives. There's a wonderful wide world of music in there. You can go to YouTube and type in Adventure on the High Seas music playlist, and YouTube will curate something that you can go and kind of look into. So lots of inspiration and information on this slide. Any questions before I move on?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, super. So when we think about building your story, I like to bring this up from my high school English class. This is our narrative arc. And when we think of freestyles and stories, they are one and the same in my brain. When we craft your choreography, we mirror this. So you have your beginning, you have your exposition, you have your entrance, you have your rising action, you have the first section of your freestyle, you're getting the horse back in front of your leg, you're doing a couple of movements, you have the middle and the climax. That's a highlight for you, maybe a couple of highlights, maybe it's your extendeds or your pirouettes. The falling action is generally the walk, right? We're giving everyone a break. Let's let it settle for a minute. And then your end and resolution is your final little bit. That's your post-walk, other sets of highlights, and then a really great final center line. This should mirror the music build. We do not want to have the music blasting at the beginning, at the middle, at the falling action, and at the end. We do not want one level of music. I want ebbs and flows. So introduce the music at the beginning, bring it up, introduce the themes during your rising action, have a beautiful extension phrasing at your middle or climax, or beautiful pirouette selection, whatever you want to do. Give everyone a break for your walk section. Let everyone breathe a little bit, and then take a deep breath, bring it all together, and have a lovely ending for your musical selection at the end. And then generally, if you have orchestral music, I usually try to bring the theme and weave it in multiple different areas throughout your freestyle. Because when we have themes on variations that are woven throughout, our brains tend to connect that with whatever we're seeing. So if you think of Star Wars, right? Like the different variations on that theme throughout the movies link together, and you know that's Star Wars. Absolutely. So think of it that way when you're building the music, whether you're doing it yourself or working with a designer. We mimic the choreography with this, and we build the music accordingly to tell a really, really good story and within your 8 minutes. Any questions there?
I think there is one. Someone started to say something about the master's test, and she's probably going to say that the master's test starts out with the walk, transitions through the trot work, and then goes to the counter work. But
Beautiful.
The same applies. You've got a rise and a fall to each of those sets of gates.
You do. So I'm assuming you have collected and extended walk, or something similar. So collected walk, you can have a little bit of a breather. Extended walk, let the music swell a little bit, then go into your trot work. Same thing within the trot work, whatever, if you're doing leg yields or half passes, have a sweeping piece of music and then transition it to something that gives you a breather on the short side before you do your next movement. Everything that you use floor plan wise and choreography wise, the music can breathe and move with it, and it needs to be organic. And that actually helps riders stay in the pocket of the music, right? So you're not consistently feeling like you're chasing something or you're ahead or behind.
I think that covers it.
Super. Lovely. Okay. Second to last slide I have for y'all is the technical side of things. And some of this is brought over from my presentation for classical dressage. So ignore some of the verbiage, but we'll walk through it together. BPMs, I think it's really important. Polly mentioned this in her section, and I will reiterate it here. Your horse needs to match the music needs to match the horse, especially with the beats per minute or BPMs. Typically, the downbeat of the music is matched with the horse's front feet. So for walk and trot, that's both feet 1, 2, 1, 2. For canter, it is the leading canter leg. So 1 and 1 and 1. If you sync the BPMs with the horses, or sync the music with the horse's BPM, excuse me, that is the linchpin, in my opinion, between the audio and the visual. That's going to open the door for the absorption and the limbic system to kick in, because it scratches a really nice OCD part in our brain. And we're like, oh, yes, that works. And we want to watch more of that. So make sure that the BPMs match. And it also helps you as a rider when you're in a show environment and your BPM is slightly slower than what your horse is going. You can have a little half halt and say, okay, come up, come back. Let's sit back in the pocket of the music. And it's kind of your safety net or your metronome that you're working against. Time limits, we already talked about that, 8 minutes. So ignore mine there. Judges placements. I'm assuming that y'all have judges. I know you've got one at C. If you have judges in multiple areas, as you're building the floor plans, think about where the judges are and where your choreography is going to shine for them. So if you are looking at doing more interesting lines, if you've got a judge on the side, what's the judge on the side going to see versus the judge at C? Just things to consider as you're building out your floor plan. Same thing with where to place some of your movements. Extensions, in my opinion, look best on a long straight line. Half passes look better going towards the judges if at all possible. And I do like to think like judges know when you're trying to hide something, right? So if your walk is all the way down at A, and you're kind of doing some interesting little lines, the judges know that it's not a strong suit. But if they can't see, say, a very lateral walk, they can't score it poorly. So again, be a little bit creative and gamify the floor plan a bit. All right.
We do have a question, Collier, about switching music from a 3-beat for a canter to 4-beat for a walk, for example. How you would switch the music.
That's a really good question. So I generally, if music works for canner, and it's got more of a roll of the 3-beat, the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, then I generally won't use it for a walk because I want something that's got either really big space in the music, so da 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 da, or a very strong marching walk if your horse has a good march, so 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So generally we'll have different pieces of music for the different gaits.
I think the question was more about the transition between building
Oh,
transition from a 3-beat to a 4-beat.
oh, yes, yes, yes. Okay. So in that case, I try to find, if I'm using orchestral pieces, the most natural organic transitions that are there. So if the music from the walk section has a buildup somewhere, use that and then drop it into the canter music. Or if you're using more pop orchestrated music, sometimes what I'll do is if I'm going from the walk, I'll have the walk end and then I'll have some isolated vocals. So only the vocals from the canter song that comes in first, and then the canter instrumentals come in, and it kind of gives our brains a little bit of a bridge. And you can kind of get creative. You can also use like a DJ record scratch for, you know, a transition. You can kind of get creative and have something that, so it's not just walk music ends, canter music begins. Okay.
Thank you.
Super. So this slide is really just how to practice your freestyle. I work very closely with my riders on practicing and, you know, creating the ability to ride a freestyle in an arena, because we do have, you know, some very technically interesting floor plans. And so what I like to have them do is chair ride a lot. So sit in a chair, play your music, close your eyes and envision the ride. As you get to know your music and as you chair ride through the freestyle, you learn where the transitions are. You can plan for mishaps because your brain is sometimes going to go, oh, wait, I forgot I had this line. Okay, restart, reset, do it again. If you get to the point, when you get to the point where you can chair ride quite well, that's going to give you a really good agile mindset for in the ring and for when you're practicing on your horse, because we can't practice the freestyles every day. Practice sessions, practice sections of the choreography without your music. Really learn it, really get, you know, into the nitty-gritty of it, use your corners, things like that. Listen to your music everywhere once you have it, and especially as you prep for a show. Listen to it in the car, in the shower, when you're doing the dishes. Have it memorized so you know all the musical nuances and the cues, because you're going to get ahead of your music. You're going to get behind your music. Your horse is going to say, I'm not playing in the sandbox today. And you're going to need to be agile in the ring to then reset, regroup very quickly and go on with the ride. For instance, if you get super ahead of your music, and then, you know, you need to do a quick 10-meter circle to catch up. You need to be able to plan where that 10-meter circle is going to be, right? And as you get settled with your music, as you get settled with the choreography and the performance itself, you're going to find the connection point between where your ride is and the music. And again, syncing with the BPMs, you're going to find your pocket. So very similar to a quarterback playing football. Football gets passed to him and he's moving around in the pocket before he throws the football. You are doing the exact same thing, but you are sitting in the pocket of the music. So ideally, you're not chasing the music, you're not behind the music, you're sitting right in the pocket and moving with it. And then you're becoming the visual representation of it. So during the show, a couple quick things. And some of this, again, we can disregard because it's for classical dressage. Bring a backup CD or MP3 file on a flash drive, just in case the show managers need it. Confirm when and where sound check is. Please go to sound check. I have quite a few people over the years that just didn't go to sound check, and then they have issues with their music when they compete. Make sure you can hear the music clearly through the sound systems. Make sure that the sound doesn't get too loud or reverbs. Some sound systems can't handle certain types of music. They're not equipped to handle the complexity or like a heavy bass, for instance. So make sure that it's not distorting because you want it to be pleasurable for the judges, and we want it to be a good experience for your horse. And if you have a distorted bass, that's not great. And then after the show, if you have CDs, pick them up. If you have any assets for flash drives, pick them up. And then continue to work with your designer throughout show season. It's important that, at least in my mind, freestyles parallel your growth as a combination. So as you're getting more set in your floor plan, do we need to update the degree of difficulty or put in different lines? Have the BPMs changed because your horse can now, do a really nice elevated trot or, really nice elevated canter? Do we need to adjust things? Keep your designer, or if you're building the freestyle yourself, make sure that you're keeping track of these changes and then parallel that freestyle growth with you so everything continues to remain on the same page as you go together. And that's really about it. That's all I had for tonight. I'm happy to open the floor now to answer any questions or discuss things. Again, thank you all so much for having me on here. This is such a pleasure to speak with you all and learn a bit more myself on working equitation freestyles.
Super. Thank you, Collier. Polly, do you have anything you'd like to add at this moment before we take questions?
Well, the only thing, I mean, like Sue mentioned, we have a designated sequence of movements, right? We can't really stray from that. So if you get lost in your music, I mean, if you get behind your music, maybe you could cut across the arena and make a different line for your walk, or, make a longer line if you plan to cut across the arena.
Exactly.
I mean, you can't really add in circles like in dressage. You have a lot more leeway. In working equitation, we don't have so much leeway because the movements do come one after the other. But you do have leeway in your choreography. You can use more of the arena than you think. And I mean, I sit at sea and I watch one freestyle after the other at the master's level, and they're all the same. And I think that people could get a lot more creative in how they ride their lines and where they do their pirouettes and how they do their leg yields. And I just think there's a lot of leeway there that we're not taking advantage of enough.
Exactly. And just to add on to that, if you are a touch ahead of your music, go into a corner super deep, or, half all and then take a slightly different line. You can wait for your music for a tick or two. So very, very similar things that I would tell my riders.
And really, you must know your music and know your test to accommodate those adjustments, but that's where practice comes in.
Yes.
We have a question in the chat. Do you use click and clear for music rights? I'm not sure what that is.
So Click and Clear is our third-party system that USAWE partnered with last year. They really came in the scene for Paris Games and the Olympics, for Paris Olympics, and ice skating was using them as well as dressage. So for the US, I do not use Click and Clear anymore. I worked with USAWE last year on music rights clearances processes for the US, and USAWE actually went out and grabbed a master services agreement from Chapel Warner Music Group, which is part of Warner Brothers Music. And their library holds like 15 million songs. And so that MSA is really for broadcasting and performance rights. And that's where we were concerned about music clearances. And so for now, in the US, we're covered. When I do have riders over in Europe or Asia or South America, I do use Click and Clear for music rights. They're super, I like them. They take a while. I usually will allow between 4 to 6 months to get music clearances.
Great. I think that answered that. Our next question is about how to find the right music for you.
That is a great question. I would start with making a short list or a playlist of music that you like. And from there, what I normally do with my riders is I start putting the music underneath the videos of them riding and seeing how the music visually presents. Does it elevate you to, does it work? And the music can be a little fast or slow. You can always adjust it. Even in something as simple as GarageBand, you can very easily adjust beats per minute and slow it down or speed it up. But if it's in a trot cadence, does it work with the trot? And does it kind of match the aura of the horse, right? Like, think about it that way. And get to thinking outside the box, right? If you're pulling, 80s rock and roll, 90s rock and roll, okay, what about sticks? Pull in some synth, pull in some Phil Collins, see how that works. Kind of go adjacent to what you're looking at and see if those work as well.
I think that question sort of leads us into the next one in the chat, which is in the US, we compete in different traditions of tack and attire. We have many different disciplines. Do you think there are any special considerations to match the music with the type of genre and the chosen tack and attire for the horse and rider?
Yes, I think that is so cool. I wish dressage did this. We can show in different coats now, or different colored coats, but that's about as exciting as we get. I think if you are showing and you have got, say very gorgeous Spanish music, right? Like have some Spanish elements on your attire and your tack. Same thing with orchestral music or pop music. I think you can very, loosely tie in, and because again, you're creating a visual story through this freestyle, and any elements that you can use there help with that.
So the music should contribute to telling that story and complement whatever tack and attire you have, and as well as the chosen type of horse you have. That seems to all blend well and would probably enhance the experience.
Yes.
And that's what makes our sport so magic, is that we have so many opportunities.
Yes.
All right, folks, we'll give everybody another minute or two if there are any more questions in the chat. I don't seem to.
One thing I would like to say from a judge's perspective is be careful with the style of music that you choose. If it's too hectic or too powerful, or like something from maybe Braveheart, and it was the battle scene or something when everybody's getting killed, and from a judge's perspective, it's a little too much tension. Like it makes me worried, so don't forget about the emotional part, and the judges really do feel that while they're watching you. So like Collier was saying about being able to choose music that can slow down a quick trot or give the impression that the trot is slower and more cadenced. So it really is an important element to the visual presentation.
I would totally agree with that. And I think I would tack on, if you are using Braveheart, we'll go with that example. Yeah, certainly let's not use the battle for 3 minutes. But,
Right.
if you wanted to have it for your extension, quick 15 seconds and then let it go. You can have certain movements and big things for highlights. Like I've got a Batman Dark Knight freestyle right now, and a lot of it is the lighter elements, and we only use the really heavy pieces in the beginning and the end and in the pirouettes, oddly enough, because that horse is very cool. But so yes, I think that make sure that we want the judges to like it and for them to have a good experience watching your freestyle, so that they're then excited to watch it again at the next show, and not go, oh my gosh, here she goes again.
And I think that's important, and it speaks to the telling of your story. We got to remember this is about telling a story, and it's a unique story, not just about entertainment overload. It should tell an actual story. We have one more. We had a comment in the chat section about a beautiful freestyle to respect, and that it was speaking of the stories. Again, hits on what we're talking about right now. We have a question from a show manager's perspective. to email and bring a thumb drive as well as a backup. That they don't usually have ways to play CDs anymore, and I've experienced that myself. It needs to be a digital format. Unless you bring a way that we can play your CD, it's not easy to transition to that technology, transition backwards.
And that's so funny because all of the big competitions down here, we still have, they say, please make sure you have a CD on hand just in case. But I would agree, have, have your music on the cloud that you can download, have it on multiple thumb drives, have it emailed to yourself just in case.
And to show management, you need to communicate with show management about their chosen style or method of delivering the music, because they're not all the same. Show management should communicate that to the writers, and then the writers should reciprocate that communication before they show up and don't really understand. I think I have one more question I have to roll down. Question for a judge. On the USAWE scorecard, does the judge leave comments in the collective marks regarding music choice?
I will if it's particularly good or particularly not good. I've made comments before where maybe it needs more expression, like someone will pick beautiful music, but it's just very backgroundy. It doesn't match the horse's tempo or the phrasing of the movements. There are no transitions in the music. It's just kind of a background music, and it doesn't do a thing for me as its emotional story aspect. And there is a section in the USAWE test for music and sequence. So, and there is a tiny, tiny little comment box there. So, if you have any questions for your judge as to why they gave you a score, look at the rules on how to approach the judge at the end of the ride or at the end of the show, and you can ask.
Thank you, Polly. We have one more question asking about where the music starts outside of the arena as you canter in. Where is it ideal to have the music start?
Go ahead, Collier.
No, I was going to defer to you on this one. In dressage, in classical dressage, we have a signal for music outside the ring, and then you come in, halt, salute. Music pauses during that halt, salute, and then you move off. Not sure how Working Equitation.
It's exactly the same in Working
Exactly.
Equitation.
Perfect.
But again, it's up to you and with your choreography. If you want to have silence as you canter in, I mean, that makes an impact as well. But
It certainly does.
I wouldn't suggest that, I guess. But remember that the timing, it's just the timing of your 8 minutes starts at your salute and finishes at your final salute. So the music, I think it gives the best impression if you start it outside and it has, like Collier said, there's an entry, there's a feeling to that entry, like, oh, here she comes, it's gonna be good, So and when you halt, you should be able to nail your music, and you should have a pause in the music there because you have a canter in and then you have a walk away. So those are two different pieces of music that need to blend nicely, but there should be a pause for the salute portion.
Yes, I agree. There absolutely needs to be a pause for the salute. And generally for an entrance, I would say 15, 20 seconds max. Like, you do not need to be, I think we've got a max time allowed for entry is 30 seconds. And so, yes, you can start anywhere, but you need to get in the ring and settle and then move on with your test. And again, the music should be a good opening exposition, right? Like, it should be either, if you're doing Aladdin, the trumpet fanfare, or Arabian Nights, or if you're doing, let's go back to the disco 70s, have some isolated vocals to enter into and then go into the instrumentals from there. Like, play that funky music, White Boy, halt, salute, and then move off into superstition instrumentals, right? Like, you can have something that tells the judges and the audiences what this freestyle is going to be and gets them excited, and then moves on into the rest of your program.
One more question was about how long to generally leave for the salute, and I'm assuming that means the pause in the music.
We have a 3-second maximum time allowed. So,
It would be about the same. There's no stipulation in the rules for that, but I would suggest exactly the same because that is kind of the gold standard for halts, right? It's 3 seconds.
3 to 5 seconds for a working equitation halt, just to show immobility. Another question we have here, some of the smaller shows do not have adequate sound systems if the arena is outside, hoping that the judges will keep this in mind if the riders can't hear the music. Is there consideration for technical aspects or elements of a facility? A lot of shows are bringing and starting to pack small speakers for this because some of the facilities that we host shows at don't have adequate systems.
Sound check, sound check, sound check. That
Yes.
is my suggestion for that. And if you don't, I mean, can communicate with the show manager ahead of time. Bring your own system if that's what it takes. I mean, if you're going to this amount of trouble, you're having a professionally made, beautiful freestyle. You want to, go to Costco and for $110, buy one of those big speaker things, and bring somebody to run it for you if the show manager doesn't have an adequate system. But communicate with them ahead of time. That would be my suggestion.
Communication is key.
and I would say on top of that, when you do sound check, you can walk around the arena.
Yes.
You can go to the far corner and make sure that you can hear it from there. Go to the judge's side, go to C, make sure you can hear it from there. I know here in Wellington on our national side, we only have a speaker in the corner by C and then one way down on the other end. And so we've got this weird diagonal, and I always have my riders walk both ends of the arena. And I don't care if the show manager gets grumpy because they've got 20 other freestyles they need to do sound check for. They need to be able to hear and make sure that they can hear their music.
Absolutely. And you need to advocate that, and you need to communicate as a competitor with show management. If they don't understand these elements, you need to communicate the importance of them. That is your responsibility as the rider. And also, be sure that you get the time you need to do that. If they need help understanding, let show management know. Most of the time, they will understand. One more question.
I don't believe so.
About earbuds. I don't think we've addressed that yet in the sport, but traditionally in all other sports, earbuds are not allowed.
Yeah, for sure not. Nope.
And I will say, going back to the sound check, if your designer's there with you, have them go with you to sound check and help advocate for you if you need it. I work with a lot of junior and young riders here in Florida, and I will go with them to sound check if they need me and make sure that we do everything together. And so they feel confident coming out of sound check that they can hear the music, that it's at the appropriate level. You can bring a friend. Bring a friend with you when you do sound check, and they can hold you accountable and make sure that you both can hear. One goes to one end of the arena, one goes to the other. This is very much a team sport, no matter which iteration of the freestyles you're doing, and people will help out if you ask.
From a show management perspective, I have also encountered considering the judge's viewpoint, because at times if the judge cannot hear the music, or if the music has become so overpowering for the competitor that it affects the judge, you have to consider that as well. So sometimes placement of the speaker, if you have an auxiliary speaker, placement of that speaker is important.
Yeah, I can definitely vouch for that. Sometimes if it's too loud, it can be really
Yes.
a little distracting. But yeah, typically if we can't hear it, it's very hard to judge. So yeah, it's very, very important that you communicate with show managers, make sure you do your sound check and really dial in your volume.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, guys, we are just about at the hour mark, and that's the golden ticket. It looks like we've answered all the questions. There are ways to get a hold of our presenters this evening if you have further questions or if you'd like to learn more. So please feel free to reach out that way. We are going to put some polishing touches on this video and get it posted and make it available to everyone who could not make it tonight. I want to thank everyone that did get a chance to make it. We really appreciate taking the time to support this material and be present. We appreciate the feedback. We appreciate all the effort.
Yes, thank you all so much for joining and having me on. I really was a pleasure to talk with you. And Polly, Holly, thank you all for putting this together. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Collier, so much.
Much obliged. Have a good night, folks.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.